But before I get to that, I want to ask, is that a person on a life support in the back, or is that your dryer?
That's my dryer. Let me get that real quick.
Okay. No problem. Just for the people listening, I wanted them to make sure no one's dying, because it did stop at one point. Just want to say Sean does really cool research with evolution stuff, genetics, cloning. You're working for NASA at some point.
I'm a physician.
Okay.
I'm a scientist. I'm a naval officer. Right now, I'm working at Walter Reed.
What's your rank now?
I'm a lieutenant, 03.
What is your favorite thing about science? Where are you at with CRISPR, and how do you navigate the ethics of that?
We're not de-extincting anything. We're not bringing back the original mammoth. What we're going to do is genetically modify an Asian elephant so far until it acts like what we think a mammoth would. I'm working with NASA on some radiation biology, particularly radio resistance. So how do we make living things more resistant to radiation? And space herpes. Space herpes is a thing. That's a fun one to talk about. But so Artemis is the new mission. And this also isn't talked about enough, but we are building a base on the moon.
Can we unpack space herpes? I'm assuming Captain Kirk has it pretty bad.
And then we started taking herbal medicine making classes from a witch in the swamps of Florida.
Let's unpack that.
Dude, this was when Harry Potter was coming out. Do you know how
she pulls a mandrake out? Before we start, where's the camera? Before we start the show, Sean's going to make this little disclaimer real quick.
Okay, well, my name is Dr. Sean Jackewicz, but please don't take anything I say during this podcast as medical advice. If you have any questions, please consult your own personal medical doctor. Nothing I say is an endorsement by any of my employers or affiliated organizations, such as the DoD, the United States government, or the Department of the Navy. All thoughts are my own.
Awesome. Thanks. This is episode, I think this will be 7 or 6. I think it'll be 7 of
I hope it's 7.
There you go. Lucky number of the David Ian House show. I am here with what I thought was Sean Jackewicz, but it's Jackowicz.
Jackowicz is supposed to be the way we say it, but Jackowicz is perfect.
Okay. Polish is one of those languages. Just I don't, I give it up.
Make it up as we go.
I was going to wear it to keep with the costume theme, this World War II helmet, but then I realized it doesn't fit over the headphones. So I just put on the fatigues. And then I did that because Sean you're in the Navy, correct?
That's right.
All right. And he's a scientist. So it's not just a military guy. He's smart. Well, military guys are really smart too. And what exactly do you do? Also, hi, by the way.
Hello, David. How are you?
Hey,
yeah, no, that's always a loaded question, especially now because I just earned a new job. So I'm a physician.
Okay.
I'm a scientist. I'm a naval officer. I guess I hate the word influencer, but I do.
Right.
I used to make content on the internet. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of what I do. I've sort of now, everything else is in behind. Now I'm full focused on physician life. So that's my day job now. Just started my first year of residency as an internal medicine doctor. So that's cool.
Okay.
And then still doing research on the side, kind of pushing it a little bit to the back while I focus on just not being a bad doctor.
Sure. And you are a PhD doctor, or a doctor of medicine?
No, yeah, MD. I've got my doctorate in medicine.
Cool. I should have had my Celsius too and get sponsored. Shout out. Cool. Okay. So you're literally Dr. Dr. Sean. How do we get that?
Dr.
Cool.
J is what I'm going to tell everyone to call me.
Dr. J. Cool. Yeah. I like that. Sorry. I'm usually good at the Polish names. What was it again? One more time so I don't butcher it 6 times.
Well, Jackowicz.
Okay. We'll just do Jackowicz. Cool.
Yeah.
I'll write off the cuff for people listening so we can get started with that, and I'll go into your background and stuff. But what is your favorite thing about science before we get in?
Oh man, favorite thing about
science. And it could be
science,
several things if you need to do that.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say, I think there might be a couple, but I guess the number one thing is that it just happens, and it doesn't require belief, like
Yeah.
science is, it's a thing that you discover. Like most of my scientific work has been in like development. So like you build things based off of scientific principles, so that you kind of predict the outcome as you're building it. But like the science itself, the fundamental truths that you're using and leveraging to make stuff happen is just true no matter what, right? Like
Yeah.
it exists. And so I think that's probably my favorite part, because we kind of just go through life sort of being like, oh, like this thing exists. Like it's always existed, but now we know it exists and it's cool. Like,
Yeah.
and then you learn how we can use it and improve our lives. But fundamentally speaking, the science just exists. And it's just fascinating that there's so much about this world we don't yet know. There was so much we didn't know, and now we do know. And it's just like playing in a limitless playground. And I think that's fun.
I like that, man. That was a quick, off the cuff, eloquent answer. That's good.
Celsius.
Celsius, I thought, okay, this is funny. I thought it was sparkling water, like all those other things over
for the whole time.
Yeah, and I was at my parents' house for Christmas, and I was like drinking it at like 11 p.m. And I was like, I cannot go to sleep. And then my dad was like, yeah, that is, because he gets like the Sam Club cases of it.
Oh yeah.
And that would explain the heart palpitations while I was sleeping.
God, is anyone else anxious?
It's like a pre-workout.
It is. It's 200 milligrams of caffeine. Like that's a serious dose.
It's a lot. So I believe in caffeine for sure. With the science being something that you can, it's this measurable, tangible thing we have. Do you sometimes struggle with parts of science? So here's where I'm at, especially as a doctor. There are people that, like, I wouldn't expect a anesthesiologist to know everything about the ankle,
Yeah.
So when I'm a scientist and someone's like, do you believe in climate change? For me, and I don't mean to get like political, but I'm cool. Like I'm all on board with climate change. Like it's a thing. But when I'm asked that, it becomes more of a belief for me, because I study rocks and dirt, and I just have to trust other scientists know that. But I still know. So do you, as scientists, do you struggle, especially in medicine? Like, is that something?
Yeah. That's a really good point. Especially in medicine, we kind of struggle with this a lot, because physicians particularly are in this weird sort of position in the public where we're scientists, right? We're taught evidence-based medicine, and we're taught all these scientific principles. But I will say, in our education, we're not taught why do we know everything we know. A lot of it, there's a lot to learn in medicine, and 4 years is really not a long time. And so you're not really taught literally why, like all the experiments that it took to come to all the conclusions that we base all of our advice off of. And so but you're expected to know that, right? Like you're expected to understand why the advice that you give is true. You do learn why the advice you give is true, but it is challenging. I think the pandemic brought it up really well, in a way that, like, you had doctors from a lot of different specialties, right? And to specialize as a physician, you get really, really specialized in one area, and you start to kind of, everything else starts to fade in the back, like you said, with anesthesiology and ankles, right? Like, yes, in medical school, I've learned about anesthetic drugs and I've learned about ankles, but as I move forward through my career, I'm going to start forgetting about probably both of them. But but it's during the pandemic, you kind of had, all of a sudden everyone wanted to know about this very specific thing, viruses. And then you had mRNA. Like, that might be a different conversation, how specialized your knowledge has to be to even understand mRNA technology. But even just viruses, like immunologists and infectious disease specialists are kind of the two that would really, truly understand those things in a very deep, insightful way. Their inner workings at a very deep way. Whereas like your general docs, your surgeons, whatever, they a lot more surface, but they're being sort of interrogated with the expectation that they are absolute experts. And they're not really. And so it's certainly challenging in that aspect, like you brought up with climate change. I studied genetics and particularly synthetic biology before going into medicine, and you get a lot of questions about evolution. I mean, my name was Evolution. you
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
you
I was
get a
gonna ask
lot of
about that next.
questions about that, and I fell in love with genetics from kind of two perspectives. Evolution was sort of a favorite of mine, but I did not like dive super deep because you can go like into computational evolutionary biology, which is
Right.
where like those people are like, if you want hard numbers, I mean, I can explain to you in very qualitative ways about evolution and the proof and whatever about it. But if you want hard numbers, you got to go to those guys because that's just not something I focus
Right.
on. So yeah, it is a struggle.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a really good answer to that too, because I do struggle with that. But before I get to that, I want to ask, is that a person on a life support in the back, or is that your dryer?
That's my dryer. Let me get that real quick.
Okay. No problem. Just for the people listening, I wanted them to make sure no one's dying, because it did stop at one point.
It's a
Cool.
good first day on the wards.
Cool. Well, yeah, a lot of paperwork, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So I've known several doctors in my lifetime, and like friends, obviously I've had doctors, but friends that went through medical school and stuff.
Mhm.
When you're in, I want to get to the evolutionary biology stuff too,
Sure.
but as a physician, I guess you went to PA school too.
MD school.
MD school, right?
Mhm.
So I'm still trying to learn those differences.
It's okay. There's a lot of technical terms, and they only matter to us. Like,
Okay.
it doesn't.
I'm just
it's
a
okay.
medical doctor to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you learn like a broad thing about like every like respiratory system, like anatomy? Like I assume like when someone's like, is there a doctor on board the plane? Like you are all trained in some way to like know something about what's going on, right?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, it was a very funny story recently. So I just started residency, right? And the first day of our orientation, me and a couple other co-residents were headed towards like a social night with the other residents. We're taking the metro here in DC. We get on the metro. We're on our way to the bar, and the metro won't move. Somebody comes in to the cart and is like, "Is anyone in here a doctor?" And the three of us look at each other and we're like, I mean, technically, yeah. We're a month away from medical school, but yeah, we are technically doctors. So we're like, yeah, what's going on? She's like, well, someone just collapsed and they need help. And so it was an opioid overdose, and the three of us responded. And I'm very proud of my co-residents. We all worked really well. I mean, we're total strangers, so it was pretty fascinating to watch our training just kind of kick in.
And
but
you're
it was
military.
funny.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and we're military. And so it was really funny, though. Not funny, but there was another doctor who ended up showing up. She's in full scrubs, and I mean, no shade to throw at her. She was definitely older than us, and she like shows up, and we're like, "Oh, you're a doctor. Like, do you want to take over? Because you're definitely more experienced than we are." And she was like, "Oh no, I'm an allergist. You guys got this." And it is something that's true about that's not really spoken about in the medical community, but like your dermatologist who works in a clinic for their entire career out of medical school, like, they might be pretty rusty on life-saving techniques,
Sure.
like they understand what's going on, but they might not be able to help really confidently. So that's an interesting thing. And it's why in general, most doctors have to go through what we call BLS and ALS training, which is basic life support and advanced life support training. It's like CPR, or it is CPR, and then advanced is like what drugs to use to help people. But
okay.
So yes is kind of the big answer, but also if you could choose, like if somebody was like, I'm a dermatologist, and someone else was like, I'm an emergency medicine doctor, like
pick the latter.
Yeah.
I guess he was technically having an allergic reaction to opiates, so that's I guess he was overdosing. Yeah. He's like, yeah, fair enough. Cool, because I've always wondered that. And if I was in a life-saving situation, I would rather you do it than like a dentist, but I'm sure he would like know something. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure even dentists take courses. They're doctor as well, and then they you do administer medications as a dentist, and people can be allergic to stuff, so you have to understand how to save someone if they're in your clinic and dying. So
Yeah.
at least enough. They might not know, like, for me as an internal medicine doctor, I focus on like critical care patients as well. So people who are hooked up to vents and have, like, are close to death and stuff. And that's a whole other, practice and study. But yeah,
Sure.
you can trust anyone, even, PAs, nurses, NPs, like nurse practitioners, they all take the same practice courses and also know how to handle these situations. So
Yeah, and they probably see it enough secondhand, like to do something. Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. Well, I have 13 minutes in. I just want to say Sean like does really cool research with you're working for NASA at some point, and then like evolution stuff, genetics, cloning. But I want to ask you, what got you in the military? What got you into medicine? What got you into that? So I'll just kind of let you, like, what kind of kid were you?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. That's where you should start. Okay, so it all started with, no, but it kind of did. So I was, funny enough with me, my mom was a nurse, or is a nurse, and so she was actually a stay-at-home nurse before it was cool. So she would just call patients after they get home from the hospital and all this stuff. And I would come home from school, and I had a sort of interest in medicine pretty early on as a kid because I saw her resuscitate like a child who had drowned. And that just sort of lit something in my brain that's never shut off. So I knew from that point on I wanted to be in medicine. And so I started showing interest, and I'd come home from school and she'd be working from home and she'd like quiz me on like, oh, I got a patient with this, and this. What do you think it is? And that kind of started getting me interested in the diagnostic standpoint and whatnot. And then we started taking herbal medicine making classes from a witch in the swamps of Florida when I was about 13 years old.
Let's unpack that.
So Rose Callahan, or Callahandran, I forget her last name exactly, but she's a master herbalist, Wiccan, amazing woman. I can't for the life of me remember if my mom found the advertisement for these classes via Craigslist or newspaper ads. Like it was back in the early 2000s, and maybe I'm dating myself, but it was one of those kind of super sketchy, like, hey, do you want to learn how to make medicine?
It wasn't like an alligator that like took you to the,
yeah. Well, so she asked, hey, do you want to come to this class with me this weekend? Because my mom had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes around this time. And her doctor was like, you'll never be able to fix this. Like, you've got type 2 diabetes now for the rest of your life. And she just didn't take that as an answer. And this was also, I think, before the time that in medicine, we now have something called prediabetes, which we do know is reversible. And so I think what the reality is, she had prediabetes, but she wanted better answers. And so she got really involved into like alternative medicine and herbal medicine and traditional medicine. And so she did reverse it, and she is no longer type 2 diabetic through diet and herbs and whatnot and lifestyle changes. So she's going through this whole period in her life, and she like kind of recruits me, and I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. That's a normal thing to do on a weekend for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
So we go to this, I'll never forget it, because we're driving through like the swamps, man. Like it is like a bayou vibe. And we get through this clearing, and there are just hundreds of cats. Hundreds.
Oh.
I don't know.
You're in witch territory.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen hundreds of cats, but it's a large amount of cats.
Jerusalem was like, it's hordes of cats. It's crazy. But anyway, continue. Yeah.
Yes. That might be, probably a really good idea of just how weird it is to see so many cats. And we're just kind of like slowly trying to drive through without running over any of them. And we get out of the car, and they like clear away. They just gone. They shoot for the woods. And it's this like little shack in this swampy area. And Rose comes out and greets us. And it ended up being like a small group of women, like probably about middle age and up. And then me, this 13-year-old boy. And it was like kind of like, a coven. And
Yeah.
the cool thing about Rose was like, it was not preachy at all. The whole point of the class was just to teach about the local flora and fauna and how you can use that to make certain kinds of medicines.
Right.
But along with her teachings came a lot of her beliefs. Before we would start any of our classes, we'd gather around in a circle. She'd light sage, incense. She'd say a prayer to the Earth Mother and then mark all of our foreheads with a rune. And then, like,
not a lightning bolt scar and call you the one who lived.
Dude, yeah. This was when Harry Potter was coming out. Do you know how like
she pulls a mandrake out?
Yeah. I was like, that's me. That's watching Harry Potter. I'm like, I'm getting my letter. But no, and then so yeah, she would tell us, like, she would teach us to, because we'd go and harvest the herbs ourselves to make the medicine. And so we'd ask the earth, like, hey, do we have your consent to take, your bounty? I plan to use it for something good. And then we say thank you and all this stuff. It was very, like, as a 13-year-old, just sort of getting that, I don't know, those little tidbits and lessons was really interesting and stuck with me ever since. Like, I'm not like super woo-woo and witchy for sure, but there's like, I definitely feel a certain connection with nature that I cherish personally. And I think it came from there. But what also came from there, which I didn't realize until later in my life, was I got an understanding of like pretty advanced organic chemistry pretty early on. So in order to extract these medicinal properties from all of the herbs, like different kinds of herbs, if you take it from the root or if you take it from like the stem or the leaves or the age of the plant or how woody it is, like all these things require certain protocols and different solvents and different heating temperatures and all this. Like, to me, I was just following directions like a Bionicles kit, right? But in the future, I was a big Bionicles guy. But in the future, when I took organic chemistry and we were in lab class, and like now they're teaching us, why do you mix like an alcohol with this polar agent or an oil with non-polar? And it's just like, it all made sense all of a sudden. I was really good in organic chemistry because of that. So it was pretty fascinating when those dots finally connected all the way then. But yeah, we did that class for about 2 years, like a couple of times a month, depending on the season. And then kind of graduated from there to enrolling in this postgraduate. There's this college called Trinity College. It still exists today. It's based out of Indiana. And they teach a lot of like alternative medicine kind of stuff, lots of courses. Back in the day, now they have online classes, but back in the day, they used to send their teachers out into the world to give like weekend long courses. So my mom and I started doing those. And like the students of these classes were doctors who were trying to get like CME credits and sort of broaden their understanding of medicine, and PAs, nurses, all sorts of medical professionals. And then there was me. So that time I was about 15, and I made it my goal to become the youngest person to ever complete this course. And I accomplished that when I was 17 years old. I became the youngest certified natural health professional in the country from this program. I can't say if there's other programs with younger people, but from Indiana's Trinity College, that's what I did at 17. So you were
like literally the Harry Potter of the swamps, dude. Like
all my friends in middle school were like telling their parents that I'm already a doctor. They're like, yeah, he's already a doctor. Like, you can trust my friend Sean. Like, he's got it. And I believed it. To be honest, like, I wanted to be a doctor that early on, but they wouldn't let me in med school. So I thought the next best thing was just to learn it myself. And again, this is before the internet's like a really easy place to learn things. Like, you still, there weren't free courses on medicine. Khan Academy hadn't come out yet.
This early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. So it was like, I was reading any books I could, but finding teachers was really important. Yeah. And I found great teachers, particularly ones that like had no problem teaching someone so young, which was the best part. So and then I went to high school, and I went to an art high school, which is kind of important with the detail that in that art high school, you needed a specific major. It's called Savannah Arts Academy. My major was communication arts, which is like film. I'm a big film buff, and graphic design, and which is kind of what led me to creating my Instagram and stuff. But particularly what's important is that during my senior year, you were allowed to have what they call an internship, right? They would organize an internship with you and somebody out in the community that you were interested in. Now, most of my classmates, they had internships in like, the radio station or the local news or something that was like communication arts based, like maybe a wedding photographer or something. But I
Yeah.
was always interested in medicine. This communication arts stuff was just an ends to a mean. The art school was a really good school. It was a really good public school in Savannah. So like it just kind of made sense to go to it. But I wanted something medical related. So I asked my advisor, hey, give me whatever you got that's medical related. I just want anything that's medical. So, well, doctors.
And this is high school?
This is high school. Yeah,
Okay.
this is senior year. So, yeah, she was saying like, yeah, doctors don't really take, like high schoolers to shadow them. It's just like too much paperwork, and they already have med students and all this other stuff. Like, it's really hard to get you in the hospital, all the red tape. But she said, well, there is this one lab in town that sometimes will take a student. Sometimes, every couple of years. I'll go ahead and email them, see if they are looking for anything. She goes to her email, and they had just emailed her right as I'm sitting in front of her. And so it's this biotech company that was just looking for some, lab tech, someone to wash the dishes, basically. Which
Was
I was
it
already
InGen?
No, it was at the time it was called, what was it called? Symploid Biotech.
Okay.
It's not its name anymore, but yeah, so I said, I'll take it. So I go there. Like I said, I'm a glorified dishwasher. But what I see around me is just this incredible science going on. And this was back in high school. Nowadays, kids are taught like CRISPR and like really cool genetic stuff, right?
Really?
I've talked to some high school students and asked them about their science classes, and they're telling me they're learning about CRISPR. They're learning about the ethics of genetic editing and all this stuff. They're asking great questions, which is really cool. But back when I took biology in high school, like you were told, all you got was Mendel's P's, and you were told that, what genes you got, and that was it. And there was nothing to do about it. But here I am in this lab, probably about 2014, and they're doing stuff in this lab that like was blowing my mind. They were genetically modifying things. And what the major project of the lab was creating a synthetic chromosome. So a chromosome, you have 26 pairs. They were creating one extra chromosome to add to that 26. So you would have 47 total chromosomes. And 23 pairs, making a 24th to have 47 total chromosomes. Yeah. And so I was just blown away. But I didn't want to bother the PhDs that were working there. They were busy, they were very kind to have me there.
Yeah, and they always seem like and
they're geniuses, right? Like,
it's like scary.
So it is scary. It's intimidating, and you just want to do a good job, right? So I would go home, and instead of doing my actual high school homework, I was looking up, genetics. I was teaching myself from Harvard courses. Harvard did have an online course at the time about like the basics of molecular biology. By this time, Khan Academy had come out, and I started self-studying using that. Like I just would drill away at my interest, my curiosity. So I'd come back to the lab and I would ask better questions. I'd be like, why are you using this kind of polymerase? And they're like, do you know what polymerase is? It was, it caught the attention of the PI, and he said, hey, like, do you want your own project? So here I am at the age of 17 in my senior year, and I got my first project, and that lit a spark in me ever since then for like lab research, specifically synthetic biology. So I started working when I was 17. Eventually they hired me as soon as I graduated high school. And that was actually my first introduction to the military, because they were a military.
What year did you graduate high school, by the way?
2015.
Oh, okay. Damn, I thought we were the same age. I graduated 2010. So now, timeline is lining up better for me now. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So they were a military funded lab. It was a DARPA funded lab. And I remember it was funny too, because they had to, DARPA was like, why are you hiring? Like, who's this person you're hiring? I had to create like an LLC to say I was a consultant. And here I am, a 17-year-old without a college degree,
Yeah.
being hired by this lab to work on this top secret project. But they wanted me because I understood the project really well. And so they did hire me, and they approved it. And I got to work on it for years. I ended up going to the University of Georgia to get my genetics degree, did some more research up there.
And
But the
that's
whole
Athens.
time, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Athens, Georgia.
Okay.
Dogs. Speaking of which, David.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and then the whole time I still wanted to be a physician. As much as I love lab medicine, nothing charges me up as much as like those moments with patients that you actually get to help and change their world or save their lives. Like, so that's what excites me about lab medicine, is that like the end product is eventually that, but the day-to-day stuff is still incredibly, I don't know, invigorating. So, so that's kind of like the super long arc of it all. And that's where we are today. Now I'm working at, Walter Reed here in D.C. and,
Jeez, dude.
still doing research and still doing medicine. The space research, like the space medicine or space biology research, is sort of like a newer development in my career, which has been cool. But yeah.
You said we'll get further with that. You said you were a film buff. Who's your favorite like director? You can also have several options.
Yeah. I mean, I actually just watched Kill Bill last night, and I was reminded how much I love Tarantino. Like,
my number one is Tarantino. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's the Coca-Cola answer, but it's good for a reason,
Yeah,
like,
dude. But here's the thing with him. He's just he's autistic about film, and like he incorporates so much from other directors, and it's just like a treat to watch him like make a movie. Yeah.
Yes. And I just, I don't know. One of my favorite things about him is his scores. Like, just like I said, watching Kill Bill, and every time with his movies, they just age like fine wine. And every time you watch them again, there's just like something else about them hits a beautiful nerve in your brain, and you're just like, oh, that was so good. Like, how did you think of it, and how is it so good even still to this day? The Kill Bill one, the whistle that I forget which assassin it was, but when
the Cottonmouth, I think. No.
Yeah.
I don't remember. The one-eyed lady.
Yeah, the one-eyed lady. So her whistle, like, that's an iconic tune that is still, like, people probably don't even know where it comes from, but if they heard it, they'd be like, oh, like, I know that. And it came from there. And it's just, he's gonna live in similar, I mean, this might be a stretch, but we teach people about Renaissance art and like the masters and the classics. Like, Tarantino is there in cinematic, mastery.
Dude, he cool, just understands, and I completely agree with that. Like, he is the definition of an artist, but like just so passionate about it, and like the basement scene in Inglourious Bastards, and then the end of it, it's just like chef's kiss, and then Django's amazing, Reservoir Dogs. But the music too, I had learned that this is when I got really into film and like making content, got really into learning more about Tarantino, and he'll listen to records like in his office and then design the whole scene in his head. And based off that, so Django was him in Japan listening to some like Western music on a cassette tape at a place. And he was like, oh, I need to make a slave that kills all the slave owners with Will Smith. And like, that's what he wanted. And then Will Smith was like, I don't want to do it. So we got Jamie Foxx, but like he wrote the whole movie, and it's crazy, dude.
I believe it, man. I believe it. I can't wait. He's got one more left, right? Is that on his 10th? He always said he'd only make 10.
He said that, and he said he'd be happy to do like a series on HBO or something, but he's done with film. Yeah, which would be like, imagine Tarantino doing a Game of Thrones sequel or something.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah.
Nuts. We're not lucky enough, man. We're not lucky enough.
We're not. Last bit that I'll nerd out on here is like, it took me several times after watching Inglourious Bastards to like, all the blocking and how he like, how cramped the basement scene is and how he does the camera work. But it's a Western, and like the Nazis are it's cowboys and Indians, and then they're like
Mhm.
it's just cowboys and Indians. I guess cowboys and Indians still kosher to say, but yeah, and the opening scene is like a Spanish guitar thing with the guy coming over the
Mm.
horizon, and I was like, oh, it is a Western, and it's like,
Oh
yeah,
man, I
the
have to
vengeance
rewatch
arc.
it then to think about that. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
so good.
he's
Mexican standoffs, yeah,
yeah, for sure. The basement scene makes that pretty clear.
yeah,
Yeah. I think he's just really inspired because like there's even in Kill Bill there was a lot of Western. I mean, just Western music with all the and the Western scenes with the Texas scenes, but just the idea of this like um, lone warrior cowboy like getting revenge and stuff like that's
yeah.
he's obviously really inspired by it and it's cool to see it through because I don't know when you can remember a last good Western in today's history, but it's sort of been a while.
310 to Yuma was really good, but that was a long time ago.
Yes, that was good. Yeah.
Anyway, any other directors or like film, like movies you love?
I mean, all the Dark Knights are always
Nolan's
solid
good.
picks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, way better than good, but yeah. Yeah.
um, uh, other directors that I'm like, well, I guess you could say director. I mean, he's much more than that, but Miyazaki, of course.
Yeah.
With the blue, the boy in the blue heron,
Right.
that was really really good.
They're
Trippy.
always like trippy and like so sad.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
yeah,
There's a touch of like, sadness to it, or maybe melancholy, but
that'd be the
it
word.
makes you think hard, I think.
Are there any films or like shows that you think does a great job at showing medicine? 'Cause my parents had always told me they're nurses, and they had told me ER or no, not ER. Scrubs was like one of the more
Oh yeah,
accurate shows. Yeah,
that's 100% right. Yeah, Scrubs is actually, as far as I'm aware, the most accurate that I've seen, which is hilarious since it's a comedy. And they probably, I don't
yeah,
even know if they did it correctly on accident
yeah,
or if they just cared that much because most other shows are not accurate. I mean, I was a huge fan of House growing up, and then you go through medicine and it's like not like that at all. But and then Grey's Anatomy is just a just a nightmare of
yeah.
medical accuracy. I will say,
Oh,
most
really?
recently, I watched Resident or The Resident on TV or Netflix or whatever, wherever it is, and that was pretty good. And it was filmed in Atlanta too, which is cool.
Okay.
But yeah, The Resident, that one's pretty good. It's still dramatized. The character relationships are pretty dramatic, but the medicine's pretty decent. The first episode has a really good ethical lesson that you do actually have to learn sometimes the hard way in medicine.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah, dude, I love movie and film too, but there's not a lot of great archaeology in
what you mean, Indiana
medicine.
Jones is not the life you live? Because I
So
was this close to going into archaeology because I saw
yeah,
Indiana Jones and I was like, oh, I could do that.
people will tell you like never tell a professor that if you're applying to grad school and stuff, but like it legit got me into it as a kid
Hell
because
yeah, man.
um, but the scenes where he's like at a university, like talking about exams and like due dates and stuff, that's accurate.
Yeah,
And then, but like
right.
eating monkey brains in a temple in India is not exactly like what you do.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the newest one, he went back in time and talked to Archimedes. Like, man, just
That happens all the time, I hear.
missed that class. Uh, but yeah, man, what? So you went to Hogwarts of the Swamps, and
Yeah.
then learned that you were working with PhDs and grad students when you were in high school. You went to
Mhm.
Georgia for medicine, right?
Mhm.
Your
Well,
undergrad.
yeah, I was, undergrad was genetics, and then I went to a small rural college in Savannah for my medical school.
Okay. What school was that?
It's called Mercer.
Mercer. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get into the military stuff, but what was your
Sure.
favorite thing about Savannah? Because I adore that city.
Oh, dude, that's so loaded. I mean, Savannah is a hidden gem, and no one should ever go. No, it's the place is magic. Honestly, I mean, so growing up there, okay, I guess my favorite part. No one really ever believes it when I talk about, but I grew up like swimming with the dolphins. You know, you've got all this
Yeah.
marshland, and you just like on a jet ski, or you're just swimming through the marshes, and like these dolphins will just come up to you. And you're told not to do this, but it's always worked out for me. You just
Yeah.
get in the water, and they'll like swim around you. And I don't, can't chase them or anything, but they'll jump up, and they'll, while you're on the jet ski, they'll just jump up next to you. It's magical at sunset. Like, I don't know, man, you
Huh.
can't beat that. It's,
Is that off like Tybee Island somewhere? Or?
yeah, Tybee Island, and more, sort of more into the swampy area.
Okay.
Yeah, just around. And in general, the people, honestly, the people in Savannah are pretty great. I remember when we first got there, and like they would just randomly, like, we're all huggers there. You
Yeah.
meet someone new and you're hugging. Like, to this day in the military, I have to physically force myself not to hug the people I meet. Like, hey man,
Yeah.
like, no, can't do that.
I think that's like a Southern thing in general too, because like when I moved from New York to Tennessee, I mean, you kiss on the cheek more in New York because it's more Mediterranean,
Sure.
but then in the South, everyone's just so warm and welcoming, and in Georgia especially. I didn't spend any time living in Savannah, but that's an interesting
Not yet.
observation. Yeah, no, not yet. I lived in Augusta for years when I worked for the vet program, and I would go there sometimes on the weekend, Tybee Island or whatever. But and then just to go, sometimes I just went to eat seafood with my friend one time, and then we drove back.
It's
but,
good. The best shrimp is in Savannah too.
The boils and like it's so good. But another thing I loved about Savannah was like, and if you guys have never been there, St. Augustine is probably like the closest thing we have to like a Spanish fort kind of colonial thing here. But like Savannah is a really cool looking like time machine of like what British colonial Southern Caribbean kind of stuff looks like in the US. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it's old, dude. It's really old. It's older than the colonies. A lot of the colonies. It was sort of made as a experimental colony, like a agricultural experiment. They would try and grow a bunch of stuff there. They even still have the house. Yeah, they even still have the house that they like started. Like they would plant indigo and rice and peanuts, and just to figure out what grew in the soil before it was technically a colony. So yeah, Savannah is old, and it's also the largest, if I'm not mistaken, the largest historical like preservation like district, like contiguous. What do they call it? Like, I don't know, historical reservation or preservation district. And so you have all of downtown just has all of these beautiful old houses right next to each other. I mean, the whole place is like a museum, and they do a very good and strict job of keeping that the way it is, which is cool. There were some exceptions during like the low economic times during like the 80s and stuff, where some things came down and bad things went up. I have some bad words to say about some buildings because they look so ugly, but that's just a me thing.
Sure.
But no, it's beautiful and historic and very haunted as well, which is,
I've seen ghost tours there. I never did one, but
you should do
it's a
them.
big
They're all
thing
pretty
down
fun.
there.
Yeah, they're all pretty fun. I was a tourist before my family moved down there. We went on a couple of tours throughout, and we love ghost tours. We feel like we get a better idea of the history, a little bit more uncensored, if you will. So we went on a couple of them.
I think I had read that in the Civil War, it might have been the Revolutionary War too, Augusta, since it was upriver, was used as like the armory, and they stored all like the stuff there. But Savannah was like obviously the port.
And it was also the boundary of Florida and Georgia, and the rest of the colonies. So Florida being Spain, and Georgia north being mostly English. It was sort of this border, the military border. And so Savannah, a lot of like, you've been to Forsyth Park, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I've been to Forsyth, the big with the fountain. The big
park in Savannah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I have been there. I just didn't know the name.
So there are these two white buildings. One's like a little cafe. One's just like a rose garden. Well, those were actual forts at one time. That's why they're shaped the way they are. And there's like where you would there the turrets would be and a cannon would be there. Like that was the boundary. And so like they would shoot at Spaniards and stuff
Right.
and keep them out. And so like it was
Classic.
yeah, it was a pretty key area in sort of the colonial times. And then, of course, during the Civil War times, it was a really, really big historical place. But I don't want to spoil it for
this
everyone.
is stuff I love that stuff, dude. Like local history, and like I did my minor in history, but like just that stuff I always gets me riled up. It's fun.
You know what you would love? So a lot of people don't know this, and I learned this firsthand. There is a catacomb underneath that park, underneath Forsyth Park.
Whoa.
Yeah, where they would bury yellow fever patients because it was there's a like just like New Orleans, there was terrible yellow fever in that area, many plagues, but so there's like the whole park is actually on top of a catacomb. Me and my friends found it and got inside in high school. That was pretty.
That's cool.
Yeah. There's this little secret entrance that maybe I won't spill the beans on.
Sure. No, that's fine. Another neat thing, I was working for a company and they hired me to do some research and write this thing about like rice farming in the South. And like, of course, Georgia and South Carolina are huge with that.
Yeah.
But one thing I was learning about was I think they told it like Georgia was a penal colony at first or whatever. That kind of has myth to it. But also another thing about Georgia was that it was like the first colony not to allow slavery when they started it. And I was doing some more research on it. And the funny thing is they didn't want the Spanish, essentially, they didn't want the slaves to be able to defect and go to Spain. Or the Spanish in the South to like pay the slaves to come then shoot at the British. So it was like more of a monetary thing than like a moral
That makes
thing.
sense. Yeah, that actually does make. I mean, anytime you want to make something make sense, follow the money. But
right.
That's what I was always told too. That it was like Georgia was meant to be a non-slave state. Actually, there's a story. I have a lot of stories about Savannah.
I love it.
But one of the they were pretty anti-Semitic when they first started. They didn't want any Jewish people at all. And then there was this like really bad plague or some illness. I don't know what, but a lot of people were dying. Tons of people were dying. And then, there were these boats full of people coming in to settle the land. And off one of these boats was a Jewish doctor and the only doctor. And so they made an exception and the rest is kind of history. He helped the people out, and they were like, I guess we'll take more.
Yeah, you guys are cool.
Yeah. So, and that's the history. There's a whole monument to that story in Savannah. It's pretty cool, and people leave rocks on it too. As
that's a
memorial.
Jewish thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that. Georgia, if you've never been there, it's basically like southern Georgia is basically Florida, and like when the Spanish like kind of held Florida and they held because it was all New Spain for a bit. Like if you've been to that area, like probably where the witches were for you, I guarantee all the Spanish in their like full plate mail armor saw it and they were like, they can have it. Like we don't want
for
this.
Sure. For sure. Nothing but marshland. I mean, Savannah gets its name because if you're kind of just looking at a higher ground and you see all this tall grass, especially when the tide's up, it looks like an African savanna. And so that's where the name came from.
Oh, okay.
I said it looked like an African savanna. But then you're wearing, like you said, full plate armor and you try and walk straight. Like, oh yeah, we could totally it's just right over there. We just walk straight. We'll invade them. And then you fall into like nothing but mud. And you
alligators
suffocate.
And stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yellow fever.
Cool, man. Yeah, I geek out on this stuff for sure. I'm glad you enjoyed it there, and yeah, it has like a special charm, and I just really enjoyed it when I would visit. But anyway, I know there's Coast Guard stuff there. I don't know if there's a Naval Academy, but what got you into the Navy with all this?
Yeah, so it's not like I come from a military family. I mean, I had like cousins and stuff who had been in the Air Force and whatnot, but my mom and dad aren't military. Mostly it came down to my parents were the quintessential Americans in 2008. And by that, I mean, they were totally over leveraged. Everything was bought on debt. And then
Right.
everything came crumbling down around us. And so we lost almost everything pretty quickly. That's actually why we moved to Savannah, because we were living, a nice life in Florida, going to Disney every weekend and thinking like, oh
Sure.
man, this is great. But like none of it was real. All of it was credit cards and stuff. Um, and so now we're renting in this like ghetto area of Savannah. Like where I grew up was not good. Now it's
Yeah.
nice. Now it's the art district, which is funny, but it was not good where I grew up. And I, I got that experience was, really character building. I saw my parents come over some really hard struggles. I mean, 2008 wasn't easy for anyone, but it
No.
was really, really tough for us. And, just the financial situation was really hard. There were times in high school that I worked 2 jobs just to help them pay rent.
Wow.
That kind of difficulty because they wanted to prioritize paying off their debt. The whole reason we moved to Georgia was because of the Hope Scholarship, which is if you graduate with a
Yeah.
B average, you get free public college, or at least like 80% paid off.
Heard
So,
that in Tennessee too. Yeah.
oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's great. So finances became a pretty real part of my life and kind of something I always had to think about. And I knew I wanted to be a doctor. And then you start doing the math and you hear about the numbers that it takes to become a doctor. I mean, it's nearly $250,000 to $500,000 by the time you're a physician. That's how much it
Wow.
takes to be a physician in the United States. And that's a big number, right? So I was pretty risk adverse growing up, or not risk adverse, but debt averse. I didn't want to kind of start off my life with that kind of debt. And the military offers a really nice program to fund you, not only pay for your schooling, but also pay you as an officer through your
Mhm.
schooling, through your medical schooling, at least. And then you come out and you serve back a certain amount of time in exchange for that. And so that was sort of the option I saw for myself. That was just like made all the sense. As soon as I understood that was a path, you know, the I get very proud thinking about serving my country. I'm
Good.
very happy to, especially as a physician. It's pretty incredible. I
Oh,
get
wrong side. There we
all the yeah,
go.
all the I grew up with veterans within my life, and I knew active service people. They were always cool to me, and now I get to treat them and fix them and heal them and make them feel good, and put them back in the fight, which I think is great. So, and then there's the resources as well that the military gives you. Like my favorite thing about the Navy so far, and this just keeps getting repeated to me by like upper leadership, but like if you want something, just ask for it. And the worst case scenario is the answer is no. Best case scenario is you get exactly what you wanted. And so like when it
Yeah.
comes to doing research and presenting research and like I don't know, just opportunities, there's just a lot of them. I mean, I'm not trying to recruit or anything, but I'm very, very happy with my decision so far. I mean, military is just like anything else, especially in medicine. There's a lot of admin overhead and there's a lot of rules in general, but doctors deal with that anyway. So it's not really that kind of thing that stares me off. And then you do have this higher earning potential as a civilian physician, but you also can be sued and you can
Mhm.
uh, you have to manage more, and it's not like a clear cut winning circle. So that's what got me into it to begin with. I actually honestly wanted to go Marines, but Marines don't have their own medical corps. So the
Mhm.
Navy is the medical corps for the Marines.
That
Um,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so that's what led me to the Marines. I also always grew up by the coast. Always wanted to be by the coast.
Mhm.
So I decided to, the Navy would keep me closer to the coast than the Army or Air Force would. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then also the officers get a sweet sword. So I got this awesome saber as as an officer. So can't go wrong.
What's your rank now? It's like
So now I'm
just
a lieutenant, 03.
okay.
Yeah. So in medical school, you start off as 01. You go to a war college for officer training for a couple of weeks. You do some other yearly trainings and stuff, and then you graduate medical school and you are promoted to 03, which is lieutenant in the Navy or captain in the Army and Air Force.
Okay, cool, man. And did you deploy or go on a ship for a while?
No, so not yet. So
Okay.
my plans are right. So right now I'm working at Walter Reed, which is the President's Hospital here in D.C., serviced by all the Air Force, Army, and Navy. And I'll be here for a year. And then my plan is to become a flight surgeon. So that's a doctor for pilots and the air crew. And so
Okay.
that's where I will do like forward deployments and yeah, get a little bit more active. That'll go on for probably about 3 or 4 years. I plan on trying to serve back my time in that stint if I get a chance, go on some aircraft carriers, live that adventurous life. And
Seems
then
like you're gonna get a lot of work in the next few years.
yeah, I've always wanted to go to the Pacific.
Or just, I guess, the Black Sea would send you there too.
Well, I don't think that Navy's anything we got to worry about.
No, okay. Yeah. Well, either way, hopefully nothing pops off here soon. But
Yeah.
I worked. I don't know if I ever explained this on Instagram or to you at all, but I worked for an archaeology program, ran like an artifact lab, and we hired vets to come do like the
That's
archaeology
awesome.
work. Yeah, man, it was
Yeah.
a really rewarding thing. It was mostly Army. It was Augusta, so a lot of people in signals or communications,
Yeah.
but people from all over. But I definitely remember anybody who was Navy was just one of the best workers I ever
Nice.
had. Kept their head down, didn't make too much
Yeah.
noise. Like, not that I saw a lot of people were talkative, but I would be like, "Hey, can you finish this box for me?" And they'd have it done by like 10 a.m. And I was like, "Well,
Nice.
just hang out the rest of the day, dude. I don't know what to tell you."
Yeah.
But yeah, man, and it's just like just any military. Like they come in and they just
Yeah.
want to do a job, want to feed their kids, and
Mhm.
need that structure. And I'm kind of a person who's like, I just hang like I'm a lax boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that didn't mesh well with them. But the point of the program
Yeah.
was to get them, because once you get out of the military, from what I noticed, you're just on your own, and there's not a lot of resources.
Yeah.
I guess for
Yeah.
lower E4s, E5s, but
Well,
or
yeah.
whatever
I mean, it
Navy
depends on your
programs.
age. It depends on your age. I suppose, what sort of career you have ahead of you. But yeah, I mean, just like in general, in the general civilian population, we see a similar thing happen when people retire from their jobs, but especially in our veteran community, when you're not just losing a job when you retire, right? You're losing a
Like your
family.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
like you said, the structure to your life. Like I said, the family, the people around you that have supported you almost through through anything and everything. So that comes with a lot of health implications right afterwards. You do see a pretty high spike in a variety of things, really. So it's something we pay attention to in that
Yeah.
community. People who just get out, like we try your mental health stuff, of course, try and keep up with them and check in, and then also their physical health can deteriorate because you also lose that like mandatory exercise and whatnot.
Yeah. The
Important.
stomachs get a little bigger, the beers get longer. I
Yeah.
noticed that.
Yeah, and they've got all this money all of a sudden too that they can just buy and drink whatever they want. So it can, yeah. I mean, it's great. I love, I love serving in the military. My favorite. I know I'm not supposed to have favorite patients, but my favorite patients so far have been the oncology service members. So our unfortunate members who have cancer, because you just can't help but just like feel for them, at a pretty deep level. It's just, I love oncology patients in general. I love being able to take care of them because there's not a lot of oncologists, and that's a scary thing to have happen to you. And it's confusing, and I get it. I also think because of my genetics understanding, I'm able to break down the problem to them in a very comprehensive way and really help them through that. Because honestly, a lot of the magic that goes into medicine is, as a physician at least, is that like you provide to somebody on the worst day of their life, you provide to them a plan forward. You
Yeah.
start to, you've just given them news that kind of like the whole world just fades to black, and they're in this sort of darkness, and they have no idea what to do next. They don't know like their prognosis. Do they have a day? Do they have a year? Do they have 10 years? Do they have months?
Mm.
Like, and so you get the opportunity, you get the honor to kind of like relight, a path for them. Be like, okay, like I know I just told you this, and this is what we're going to do next, and then we're going to do this, and then if this goes this way, we'll do that, and you just kind of present to them a plan that shows some level of control. I mean, there's not, would never say that like a doctor controls their health. We don't, but we control that plan, and we can maneuver that plan to get them to a healthier place, get them to a quality of life that they enjoy more, or maybe back to a life that they knew before, all dependent on what's going on. But that's kind of the magic in medicine, I think, is being that confident like decision maker for your patients in a time that's incredibly scary and confusing. And doing that for oncology patients and our service members has just been like I said, very invigorating, very rewarding just to see it, on their face, and to know that you get to help someone out who laid a lot on the line. They just volunteered for this.
I imagine now that Afghanistan's kind of died down, and I don't know where else we're deployed in a lot of places, but is Walter Reed pretty rough to work at? I guess now it's kind of more cancer, just people with some like lingering issues.
Yeah, definitely. A good veteran community. Of course, you also have the VA for that as well. But I mean, there's I don't know how much I can describe
sure.
of the current situation there. It's not an active wartime, so it's not. The coolest thing about Walter Reed and military medicine in general, I'll say, is and we really don't give this enough credit as civilians. Like this isn't talked about, but it's one of the coolest things about, I think, medicine, and especially military medicine. But if you were a casualty, so you're hurt in combat somewhere in the Middle East, Afghanistan, for example, we have a care chain that will, within 24 to 48 hours, you're either in Germany at the Air Force hospital there, the big Air Force hospital there.
Is that in Ramstein?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Or you're in Walter Reed. You're back home in the States within 24 to 48 hours. You know how insane that is? Like that's halfway around the world. And there's this whole chain of medical logistics that picks your body up, stabilizes you, and all the way back home to get the best care that you can possibly get. And that's cool. Like that, other militaries don't have that. Like most people probably don't think about military medical logistics, but I can tell you that part of the United States superpower is that, and our ability to accomplish that almost anywhere in the world. So it's, we talk a lot about our missions as military physicians, especially starting my job now. We kind of been getting this a lot, but I've been thinking about it a lot. Is like our mission, like we're not the warfighter. Our mission is to support the warfighter. And part of, when your friends and family, your brothers and sisters decide to join the military, is they are trusting to an extent that, they're not just going to go and die, right? That's not the agreement we make with them. The agreement that the United States as a whole makes with the citizens who decide to volunteer for our military service is that they will come home, that the military's got their back, and that we're not just going to send them in to die. That's not how we fight wars. We make calculated.
You're going to sit in the desert and do some radar work. Yeah.
We make calculated decisions to make sure that like as little casualties happen. And then if they do, or when they do, that we'll take care of you after that. Now, there's a lot to be improved upon. Don't get me wrong. It's the promise that we try to keep. And I think it's pretty cool to try and keep that promise.
Good, man. I hate that it's kind of like taboo to be like, I'm proud to be American. I love my country. But
I know.
We do our bullshit around the world, but I think all in all, like it's nice to have these conversations because I do fucking love living here. It's like,
well, my favorite conversation about that topic is that like we do some bullshit. I think it's really important too for people to not think about one, the military, but two, even the United States is this like one perfect machine. Like the CIA and FBI don't like each other. Like they're stepping on each other's toe all the time. Yeah. They're controlled by singular people in their jurisdiction. Like the military is a huge combination of people that are just trying to do stuff. Like it's not this robotic perfect machine. I mean, and so like bad stuff happens. It's not technically, it's not like that was an order to make the bad stuff happen. A lot of the times it's usually just like a bad person, using too much power or something, that's one thing. I think you got to give some grace to this imperfect human machine that is the, not only just the military, but the entire United States. Also, like very new in history, all the other giant empires of the world have all been controlled by singular leaders, and we're a democracy, that's messy. And then at the same time too, like the Navy, a lot of people like don't really know what the Navy does. Like why is the Navy a thing? And yet they're texting on their iPhones, using a
Japanese
desk
at bay.
They're making anime. They're at bay now. But no, like the Navy's been this like patrol of the oceans, and we've maintained these highway systems, if you will, of shipping lanes. And if we haven't done that in the last 60, 70 years, like none of this around us would exist. We wouldn't have cheap headphones and microphones. We wouldn't have desks that we could just buy off Amazon. Amazon wouldn't exist. Like it's this similar to health. It's like something you won't notice until it's gone. Just like during the pandemic, when we started to notice a little bit because there was a little blip in the supply chain. Like that supply chain thing is not a guarantee. And in fact, in all of history, it didn't actually exist for everyone. Like England had a great supply chain for when they were the empire, but like France didn't get to have a good supply chain because England would say, "Fuck you, I'm going to blow up your ship."
Like, Spain either. We destroyed Spain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like in the first time in history, the United States has been like securing the waters for everyone as long as they play nice, and then the ones who don't play nice, we do other stuff too. I think that's important for people to understand too. Like you don't have to love the military and like you don't have to support killing people, but at the same time, like you have to recognize the military is not just this like murder machine. We have hospital ships that we send to third world countries to take care of them when they're hit by a bad hurricane. We do that for free. That's just like a goodwill that we try and do to the world. We're building new hospital ships to do more of that. It's like
we're like in Jordan to protect against like Iraq. Yeah, it's just like because I see a lot of, especially on like the ground news stuff. It's like, why are we stationed there? Why are we have troops there? And it's like, well, to keep shit from popping off, kind of number one. But also with like the Houthis, not to get into it, but like the Red Sea thing, and they were like, why are we there? It's like, well, if nothing goes through that canal, like Amazon will not work. Like you will not get anything next week. Yeah. So I mean, it sucks, but it's just like we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes and like good, like you're saying. And one thing I noticed, not that I thought everybody in the military was like a Call of Duty bro, but one thing I noticed at the vet program was like a lot of people, I'd say 90% of them were people that some of them were like, I wanted to do it my whole life. Others, those are usually Marines. But other people were just like nerds that just didn't know what they wanted to do after high school, and that the Army offers money. And then they ended up being a truck driver or signals. One person was like a Russian linguist. And then when they get out, they're like, all right, what's next? And it's like, that's the military to me. It's not exactly blowing up people in Fallujah, you know?
Yeah, no, I
So,
mean, the combat rules, I mean, we haven't been in a major war in a long time. Even our, you know, our positions in the Middle East have not been like the wars that we think about when we think about like World War II or One and whatnot, or even the Vietnam struggles. I mean, the Desert Storm might be a different example, or the Gulf Wars, but yeah,
that was efficient.
I mean, it's, yeah, those were efficient. But no, so yeah, the majority of the military is honestly a desk job. If we're being honest.
Clerical stuff.
It's a lot of that. There's a lot of, like you said, technical work, a lot of science going on in the military. There's lots of laboratories around the world, you know, trying to do good things. You know, a lot of medicine that comes out for infectious disease comes from the military because we're trying to prevent, you know, our troops who are stationed in infectious areas from getting sick. And then that passes on to, you know, people. And like a lot of malarial treatments came from the military. A lot of vaccines came from the military. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot more than people give it credit for. To be honest, you know, I can't expect people to just search or just to seek out to give it that kind of credit. We give it a bad name in the movies. People care more, you know, it's flashier and more fun to show them all the fighting that the military does, or the intel community and all the spying and like the backstabbing, like, but it doesn't like inherently just create this mistrust, which is unfortunate. I mean, we could probably go on about having conversations about should we glorify war or not glorify war, and you know, what is the attitude we should have about nationalism. And I agree with you. I think I think the pendulum has swung pretty hard to being anti-nationalistic, like just anti-American, American. And I think that's pretty gross. I think the people who are that way are usually pretty young and naive about what they get.
Because I was that way too when I was younger.
I was pretty rebellious when I was younger too. But you don't quite understand what you're getting from the deal, you know.
And then I started getting shit taken out of my paycheck, and I was like, all right, well,
or just understanding like sort of like the instability of other parts of the world,
right?
You know, just that it's expensive and it takes a lot to create the life that we have, and it's not the default. I think that's really important that people need to understand, is that like none of this is the default. All of this has to be, every day we have to try to maintain it. The one day we don't is like the day we could lose it all. And it's a very like terrifying thing to think about, but that's why we have the systems in place to do it. Yeah.
The Gaius Flavius, I interviewed him a couple months ago, the Roman centurion dude from Instagram.
Oh yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah, he's the shit, dude. It's episode 4, I don't remember, because it's a few back. He is Swedish, and we were talking about it, and he was saying like Sweden, due to its government, he's a politician there too. In local government. Yeah, it's so funny.
Does he go to his Senate
that's what I asked robes? Him. Yeah, and they got to search him for knives when he goes in.
YouTuber tag, YouTube.
He said that like because of their government and stuff, like they don't have a lot of culture that they can produce, so a lot of it's just American and Japanese and well, I'm assuming a lot of Japanese because he likes that stuff too, but he said American, and he was like, a lot of Swedes hate America because of, you know, their stuff. And it's like, I remember in the podcast being like, what? But not foreign people that live around the world see what we do. And I can totally get why they think that and stuff. But like, they obviously, in his case, understands like the everyday American is just cool as hell. And like, it is cool here.
I think that's like easily could be said about, you know, it's a really good sort of I guess like a good reason to travel, you know, like in general, all of us are all pretty cool. Like in general, I think we're all, you know, we have to stereotype as people. It's sort of just built into our psyche that we need to put boxes around things and just say, oh, everyone from this place is like represented by this stereotype. We have to do that. It's the only way our mental models work. But when you finally get out there and start to explore like, I mean, people are just cool in general. Your people of countries are not their government.
Mhm.
Specifically the ones who come from authoritative governments.
Right.
They're literally not their government.
Going on right now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think that's cool. I mean, it's also true about even within the United States too. It's like, Southerners are all stupid, right? Like that's a
Right.
pretty, widespread belief. And then you go down there and they're not, and then like same with the Northeast being, stuck up and full of themselves, but
Yeah.
most of them aren't, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Most of them aren't.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing too. Cause it's just like living in the South in Tennessee, and in Augusta too, very different vibes.
Yeah.
But like there are some people like that. And a lot of it is just said ironically. They don't mean it. But like
Yeah.
most people are so warm and welcoming, and like they might ask like, what kind of Muslim are you? But like they mean it in like a curious way, not like not like in
Yeah.
a bad way,
Yeah.
but maybe say it a little differently. But
That's true. And you have to
yeah.
know that like the people down there until more recently, I will say, which is actually was fascinating to think about, is sort of the population admixture that's just going on in America all the time, which is a pretty unique thing for human history as well. But you know, probably up until the 2000s, like most of the Southern people have never met someone who's Muslim, right? And then
Right.
all of a sudden, during all these Iraqi, Afghani wars and everything, there was a lot of refugees that were brought into Atlanta, and
Hmm.
you now had this huge influx of that population. And these are people who have like they're just trying to escape their terrible government, right? Like
Yeah.
they're good people, and here they are in our country trying to live out this dream. All my friends from my best friends from college were all Iranian, and so
Yeah.
like they're the most American, like red, white, and blue blooded motherfuckers you've ever met. Like
Yeah.
because they're trying to live out that idea and that dream of opportunity, and that that they get to shoot their shot at it all. And
Yeah.
it's cool to see that. And I like that's something we can always be proud about, or should always be proud about as Americans, is that this idea that we shouldn't care where you're coming from. And I think relatively speaking, we don't.
Yeah. You're American. Like even if like you are foreign or from
Right.
somewhere else, you're still in line at Walmart dealing with the same bullshit as we are. Like you're
Exactly.
American, and I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think we, I don't know, like for whatever reason, that's not something that we're all proud of. Like you said, people are afraid to say, I love to be American, which is weird. Like, even if
yeah.
you're like anti this, pro that, whatever, like
You're
the
allowed to be here.
yeah, exactly. Be
Yeah.
proud that you're allowed to be all of these different things. Like that's what you should be proud of. You don't have to believe what I believe in, and I will die for your ability to believe in what you believe in and say what you want to
Right.
say. But like that should make you proud. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's an endless conversation.
Yeah, it can be like for sure. And I guess I'm getting at anyone who's like from another country, like listening to this right now, because I know I got people from Australia and Britain and
Yeah.
Europe, but like this is Americans like what am I trying to say? We're not all like Trump or Obama, like we're this. So or Mitch McConnell or AOC, but like yeah, we all just like do our thing, and like
Yeah.
I don't know. I love it here, dude. So I'm not afraid to say it. And then,
Yeah.
but I understand where they're coming from and stuff. But to segue, and you said some of us in the military, not us, you do research and stuff. What exactly are you doing? And like, I know I asked this earlier, but like, what's your role right now? And we can segue that into science.
Yeah. So my role right now, I just started a new project. I'm working with NASA on some like radiation biology. Particularly, I've in the last, I don't know, maybe 4 years or so, I guess maybe closer to 5 years or so, I've been focused mostly on radio resistance. So like, how do we make living things more resistant to radiation? Particularly interested in like deep space radiation, but it also has implications for like cancer treatments. There are cancer treatments that you get, and then you end up with another cancer, right? Like that's not good.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with actually also for war fighters, they're exposed to radiation and oxidative stress that can mess up their DNA that we would also like to prevent. So that's kind of like the big thing I've been focusing on in my career as of the last couple of years. And so I've joined a lab at NASA, sort of doing that on the side as I'm doing my doctor job. Most of my research career has been what we call in the community wet lab, which means I go to an actual like lab bench and I play with water, play with little fluids, move tiny drops of water into other tiny drops of water. But it's like it's what you think of a scientist being in a lab. Whereas there's also in biology what we call dry labs, which is like data crunching, data analysis. You're on a computer, you're on the beach in Mexico. It doesn't. You can be anywhere,
That's cool.
or in a tiny little apartment like me. So so that's what I'm focused on right now. Doing a lot of analysis, trying to figure out what genes actually protect living things from radiation, and then maybe try and give those genes to other animals like humans and help them survive space. But
that's fucking cool. How do you navigate the ethics of that? Because I know that's a hot topic.
Yeah, that is a good topic that NASA and all the space agencies are currently wrestling with. Humans in general are also wrestling with it, but I think the ethical debate in humans is pretty clear. Like we're pretty unanimous on our ethics for gene editing in humans with diseases. It's like, okay, if you have a disease that we can get rid of with a gene modification, we're going to try to do it.
Right.
And everyone seems to be on board with that. Makes sense. And what we're going to do is we're not going to edit the part of your genome that will then get passed to your kids. We're not going to do that. No one wants to do that except maybe China. But throwing a little shade.
All good with me.
But yeah, so that's here on Earth, and that's cool. But where does the ethical line get drawn when we're talking about editing perfectly healthy humans? It's tough. I kind of think of it a little bit like vaccines, in the way that if we create a vaccine that can in fact fix a problem that would otherwise happen, and then we send a person into an environment. Say we send a kid into one of those caves full of smallpox, and we don't vaccinate them, right? Then we've given them smallpox. Like if you do just the logic leaps, it leads to you thinking, I gave this kid smallpox. I could have sent, why are you sending a kid into a cave of smallpox? Whatever. But I could have given them a vaccine that would prevent the smallpox, and then nothing bad would happen. And so the same idea is going to, I think, sort of come to head when we get the ability to send people into deep space. Right now at NASA, we're talking about the Artemis projects. So Artemis is the new mission, and this also isn't talked about enough, but we're going to the moon, people. We are building a base on the moon. Like that is the goal.
Did not know that.
Yeah, cool. That's like before 2030. we want a moon base, like people living on the moon. And so the moon, for people that don't know, is outside of what we call the magnetosphere. And so it does not receive good protection from radiation and is in an area of space that we call deep space. And in deep space, you are subject to higher energy ions that are like grenades to your DNA. They just go in, they hit your DNA, they supercharge those atoms, and those atoms create free radicals that go on to hit more parts of your DNA. And it can be really bad. The cancers that are sort of caused by this kind of radiation are more aggressive than just regular cancers. And so we're going to put these people at pretty significant risk. Now, we've done the math. We understand the probability of different things happening over certain amounts of time. And so that's built into these missions. So it's not like if we don't figure some sort of cure out or vaccine, And I don't mean that we're making a vaccine for this, but this preventative measure, if we don't figure this out by then, it's not like we're sending them in to die. We're going to switch them out. The shifts will just be much more common. The lifetime exposure to radiation, like they'll hit it and then they're done. Like they can't go back. That's the kind of mission logistics we're going to have to work with. But if we had that type of technology to prevent that from happening, then we could extend their ability to do their work. We could extend the amount of people who can go to space. We can extend the information that we extract from each mission. And honestly, we can't do anything about Mars until we get that kind of technology. The exposure to radiation, that even just the trip to Mars is almost a lifetime amount. And so you get one trip, and then one trip back is 2 lifetime amounts. It's like, it's not going to work out. That's a huge risk. So there's a big need for this. There's a lot to figure out for sure. But we need to, if we want to make this kind of thing happen, we're going to have to implement what I call a biological spacesuit. We do a good job.
Before you get into that, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
A biological spacesuit. With like Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, and I forget the first guy who went up there. Something
Yuri.
And there was another guy, something young, maybe. I don't know. What happened with them in terms of radiation? Was that something considered or understood then?
Good question about whether or not
that's not deep space.
Understood. Well, so it was when they went to the moon, but
because his skin's still all on. That I know of.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. As far as you know,
just neck down.
No, so yeah. So that's kind of the point, is that the ability to get someone to the moon and back. Like, we could do that today. We could have been doing that. It's just expensive and not really worth anything at the moment. But the risk to go to the moon is not crazy. It's to stay on the moon for longer periods of time that's pretty crazy. And so these trips back and forth aren't these huge health risks. And to be honest, we've, I was talking about medical logistics in the military, but medical logistics in NASA is like incredibly admirable. They think about these things very hard. And we have not had like major health concerns from any of our astronauts. There are some stories about clots and stuff, but in space herpes is a thing. That's a fun one to talk about. But as far as like radiation damage from lunar trips, if they're quick, not a super big deal. You could probably do a couple of them in your lifetime, and that's cool. But if you're living on the moon, or if you're going to go to Mars, that's going to be bad. That's not good.
Can we unpack space herpes? I'm assuming Captain Kirk has it pretty bad.
But I bet he does. Yeah, he's probably patient 0.
I'm assuming it has to do with just like cells mutating or something, or
so
a virus.
Kind of. So it's herpes is sort of a class of different viruses. You have Epstein-Barr virus. You have, of course, varicella zoster. These are different herpes viruses that are pretty well known. And most of us carry them all the time. I'm not talking about genital herpes or even cold sores, although that's another good example of how like most people just have it.
Yeah.
But EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, is one that's mono.
Okay.
And most of us get it eventually at some point. Most of us don't know that we have it because it never did anything to us. But when you go to space, not only are you under an incredible amount of mental stress because you're strapped to a bomb and sent off of the planet, but in a tiny can
made by Boeing.
Well,
not all of it.
But you're also under incredible physical stress from the radiation and that actual launch and other stuff, the sleep disturbance and the microgravity. And so your immune system is all out of whack. It's screwed up. And one thing that happens when your immune system is suppressed by stress are these herpes flare-ups that are pretty common even on Earth. Like I said, with cold sores, like people get cold sores close to tests. Like we'll get patients who are students who are like, I've got this problem. And it's easy there. But what happens when you're floating around in zero gravity? Your skin is covered in a herpes infection by something, say, like shingles. That's another herpes infection that's been triggered by all this stress you're under. It's incredibly infectious. And so you've got all these like random things just bumping into you throughout your floating around in space. And then other people bump into the things you bumped into. And all of a sudden, the entire crew.
It's just all herped up.
Yeah. So there's some good, there's a really good paper that was published about, you can go Google space herpes if you get a chance. Is a really good paper written up about this situation. And it's also a really good example of space medicine and kind of the unique environment that exists in these space stations and in space shuttles and whatnot. So,
yeah, that's cool, man. I never would have thought of that. So something you're doing has to do with NASA, correct? Remember us talking about that?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's classified. You don't have to go into it, but.
Oh, no, not classified per se. I mean, so I won a competition at NASA recently for my research. That was freaking incredible. I didn't expect that.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So it was actually call back to when I was talking about creating a synthetic chromosome. So I continued doing that research up until I was a medical student and came back and started up with that research again. And, we had built the synthetic chromosome. We have tested its safety and its stability, and everything was all green lit. And now is the time to give sort of proof of concepts. Like, how would you use this? In what way could you use this? And so my project was particularly focused on creating this biological spacesuit, basically. And so how do you give a living thing more radio resistance? And the way you do that, there are certain genes and proteins that those genes make that protect or stabilize the genome. I gave these cells the ability to produce this protein at will, like from outside of the dish. I can turn it on and off based on what I add to the dish. And we call that inducibility, or I induced a protein product from this synthetic chromosome. So I showed that it worked, and NASA thought that was pretty cool. And so they awarded me first place as a graduate student. And then after that, my life kind of changed a little bit. I got a lot of phone calls from a lot of people I look up to, and was asked to join in their efforts to do more cool science. And so from that point on has been kind of, being in those circles now.
Where were you, or who were you working for when you figured that stuff out before they all started emailing you?
Where like
you were just in school?
Yeah. So okay. I was a medical student at the time. And then the competition or the symposium is the Human Research Program Investigators Workshop, which is this annual scientific conference of students from around the world, from Yale, Harvard, Oxford, all over, different labs and different companies, different hospitals, Johns Hopkins, stuff like that, all trying to make cool science to make human existence in space possible. So I was just at my small rural college submitted a project that I worked on during the pandemic, that I kind of threw together in a couple weeks, and it had won. And it was pretty incredible that
sick, dude.
It worked out.
Cool, man. I guess, can you put it into layman's terms one more time what it is? Just in case people are confused.
Yeah, it is. It's easier to show visuals too, but the way I kind of pitch it is that it's a sort of like a biological computer. And what I mean by that is that this chromosome, which is a collection of DNA, it's only about the size of the Y chromosome, which is pretty small. So When it's off, it's totally off. Like it doesn't accidentally turn on. It can't accidentally turn on. But we have these like what we call integration sites. There's about 70 integration sites. You can kind of think of that like a USB port. So you can plug in something to that USB port and sort of install some software, right? And then later you can turn that software on and off. What's sort of magical and very powerful about the system, though, is that, with one integration site, with one USB port, you can add not just one gene. You can add what we call a genetic circuit, which is like a logical circuit, kind of like in software where you can make for loops and if-then statements and all this. You get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And that's in one. So if you have 70 of those, you can do some pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it in the nutshell. It's this tiny little bit of DNA that exists, doesn't interact at all. It can be turned off. It can be deleted if we need to. And it's controllable from the outside. Like I said, with these inducible circuits, I can give a cell doxycycline, which is a very common antibiotic, and it would turn on the genes that I want it to turn on.
Got a bottle of it right there. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So if I had programmed your cells with it, then I told you to take some pills of doxycycline, and I could make your skin glow or something. I don't know.
Whoa. Okay. I would have thought that came from the tick bite, but speaking of making your skin glow. Oh, 1 sec. Are you at a standing desk?
I am. Yeah.
Damn. Cool. Going fucking hard.
Hey, it's just the best lighting, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If I sat in my chair, it just didn't look quite good. So
cool.
That's one thing about the military. You just get really good at standing.
Yeah,
the fact that I get to walk, kind of move around is like a gift from God.
Well, cool. Where was I at? Back. So, my dog's being a fool. Speaking of things glowing, where are you at with CRISPR and like those kind of ethics? And it's surprising to, well, I guess in a good way, that children are learning about it in school now. I didn't think about that because I have my thoughts on it, but I'm also not, again, ankles versus anesthesiology. I don't know much. Yeah. No, that's a question I think everyone should have an answer for themselves about, to be honest. I remember when CRISPR was, just coming out, I'd given I haven't done many podcasts, but there is a podcast of me being interviewed about this a while ago, which is interesting to look back now thinking about it. But my answer hasn't changed too much. CRISPR is revolutionary. It's incredible. It's changed the rest of history from the moment it was made to now and into the future. It has its limits, and people are working every day to make those limits, push those limits and make it better and make new things that are good at editing. I think CRISPR itself, the whole system of CRISPR, which is to say kind of like a copy and paste for genetics, is a example of, our roles as humans has fundamentally changed. Like as our roles, like as a human animal, has fundamentally changed. We now control biology in ways that no other animal can even come close to. And, just like in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Absolutely.
And I think I certainly have different opinions on how that could actually best be used. I mean, I'm obviously a proponent that for astronauts, I think genetic modification is it's necessary and will have to happen. Genetic modification of humans has already begun. We've already begun to cure sickle cell disease with it, which is incredible. There are many other diseases, about 30,000 other diseases that we hope to cure with gene modification. And CRISPR, like I said, is just one tool in a toolbox now that is expanding every day. Part of why I even made my social media presence, my Instagram, many years ago was because of the experience I was getting in the lab when I was a high school student. I saw stuff coming down the pipeline that was, it was going to blow people away. No one was going to be ready for it. and just like the general understanding about genetics and GMOs and mRNA is just so behind that it when people are faced with something they know nothing about, the first reaction is fear always.
Yeah.
And so I tried to create a sort of a space to deliver information in a way that's more explained, and we would have longer conversations. Eventually algorithms kind of forced me out of that, and you can only do so well on social media with difficult topics like that. But
yeah, generates engagement.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that CRISPR is a powerful thing, and we have to be very wise about how we use it. And I think we have been. I really do. I mean, things could be so much worse. Trust me. And then that might be worth talking about. Is just like the opportunities for terrible, terrible things to happen, like versus when the nuclear bomb happened, right? That was another point in history where our fundamental position in life, like in all of biology, changed pretty drastically. Creating more nuclear bombs is like a very difficult thing to do. And we've created really good systems to like track those things and whatnot. Biology is different. And like I could build a biology lab in my kitchen like pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's cool. And I'd love the idea of people doing like, biohacking in a way that's, safe and ethical. But, just like me, when I was a high school student, I got to play with biology and it blew my mind. Like I want more people to have that. And I actually have goals in life to make that happen. But at the same time, we also have to be very, very wise about biosecurity. And I don't think that's really something that's thought about a lot, especially, I mean, coming now from a military perspective and from a physician and from a scientist perspective, like there's a lot that is at risk, and it's not like we have a really good handle on it. I think COVID was a perfect example of how like biological risks can easily take us by our balls and change the world.
Right.
So
and no one's prepared for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is it's not like, going back to a nuclear example again, like what we're afraid of from nuclear war is another nuclear bomb and like more nuclear bombs. And so like the threat is consistent. The threat is another nuclear bomb. The problem with biology is that like, okay, like SARS-CoV-2 sucks and we don't want that to happen again. So we're going to like protect ourselves from more SARS-CoV-2. But what if we get like, super measles, right? Like what if there are just millions of other things like attack vectors that we have to be concerned about that we don't even know to be concerned about yet?
Right.
That's scary to me.
I guess a couple of things there on that last one. My whole thing is like whether you believed COVID was real or false in the beginning and yada yada, like, and they're like, oh, they're trying to control us. Yeah,
because I didn't think it was real at the beginning. So
really,
I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. I have video proof on my Instagram of me talking about it. Like, this Chinese thing is like, no, nothing to worry about, guys. Like, it's totally. I have all those selfie videos, like, and it's hilarious to watch now because I became very active during COVID when it came to like monitoring the evolution of the virus and whatnot. Maybe to a point of too active. I was pretty anxious during that whole pandemic.
So was I. Yeah.
But yeah,
that's cool, man. I'm glad you had the ability to call yourself wrong. It takes a lot.
Certainly. Yeah.
Where I was going with that is like whether you did or didn't, and like, yeah, sure, maybe that somebody's trying to control, like, see what they could do with the population, yada yada. But like, whether or not, when the next one comes and say it's like some airborne rabies type thing, like I want to know that there are things in place that like people will mask up. People will like, so the next one, I think we're screwed. But yeah, and I think it'll be a thing, but anyway, sorry. But where I'm at with CRISPR and stuff, and I'll let you jump on that. But let me walk it back here. In Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, he's playing with pigeons and he's like, wants to breed bigger beaks. But when he does that, he gets smaller feet. Yeah. When he wants like a certain color coat, he'll get some that have like weird shaped feet or like wings or something like that, or different colors. I worry about with CRISPR, some kid in his lab who's like kind of a genius kid like you were, playing with it and then like gets some kind of virus. Like, not that that would happen, but something goes wrong with it, or he puts it into his dog, which then something,
Yeah.
and like that's the fear that I have,
Yeah.
because I personally think humans will end with some biological thing more so
Okay.
than nuclear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll take from 2 points on that.
Yeah.
I will say, to quell your fear, because I think I'm pretty confident that the greatness of our species, as with many species that have lived so long, is our biodiversity is quite large.
Okay.
So to program something to just kill all the humans is probably really, really hard. So you can at least you might die, but some of us will
Sure.
make it. But no, so that's all just to say that's a great strength of ours, is our biodiversity. Now, if the AGI thought about a way to do it, then maybe we're screwed. But that stuff scares me.
What's AGI?
With like all this AI stuff, like
I see.
what's it called? General intelligence, artificial
Gotcha.
general intelligence. Anyways, now from the perspective of like some garage biohacker creating something terrible. Yeah, no, I mean that's a real fear, and the powers that be are afraid of that kind of thing too. It's typically why, like, to get lab reagents, you have to put in like certain certificates and stuff to say where you're getting it from. There are some companies out there that get around that. You can kind of get like Odin, what's it called? Odin Labs or something.
Okay.
You can get, and this isn't an endorsement, but you can get biotechnology without saying why you're going to use it or like where you're going with it and whatnot. And that's why research is expensive, and that's why you need grants, because those grants are then monitored and tracked for the outcomes you come up with. But to be honest, this is all just in the United States, and then like the rest of the world, someone else could do this anywhere else. And that's what has always scared me, is that no matter how strict we are here in our country, like it doesn't stop anyone from another country from being nefarious. And right. I mean, I don't really have a good answer for biosecurity. There are new Ginkgo Bioworks, which is a biotech company that is they're doing a lot of things, but they just came up with another spin-off company called Concentric, and they're trying to build these, like, you can kind of think of like hurricane radars. How hurricane radars will scan the horizon for developing hurricanes. These bio radars, or whatever they're calling them. I think that is what they're calling them. They're basically going to be scanning the air in airplanes, the water in wastewater in airplanes, the air and water in airports around the world for like just mutants of different viruses and bacteria, that to try and kind of see like, oh, here's like one going down a path, because we can predict ones that are like headed in a direction that could be dangerous, and then maybe start whipping up something. Because our ability, one amazing thing that the pandemic showed us is the scientific community's ability, like around the world, to commit to a project was incredible. From being on the inside, it was incredible. It was so cool to see. I mean, it felt like the Manhattan Project, except everyone was involved.
Yeah.
And then also just like for the United States, I can't speak for other countries, but for the United States with like Project Hyperspeed or Warp Speed or whatever it was called, just like the logistical funding to kind of get things figured out, to get things funded correctly. Like that's a big deal. It's not like a default. Like getting money to the right hands at the right time is really hard.
Yeah, especially with the feds.
Yeah, I was going to say, being the government, you kind of like, it takes a while typically, but it didn't in the pandemic. And that's why, like with mRNA technology had been around for a while, but it's super unstable. I always hated working with mRNA in the lab because it's just incredibly unstable at room temperatures and just falls apart very, very quickly. And that's why you needed to create logistical chains of refrigeration at like minus 80 degrees. And you have to maintain that temperature if you're going to get this product to millions of people. And so like creating that whole like logistics system didn't need to exist before, and then it had to, and it was built. And then all of a sudden, a technology that made sense on paper but not in real life started to make sense in real life too. And so, you see that, and so that's the kind of response we hope to get. I mean, of course, it'd be best if we never have to deal with it again, because we just made solutions before problems ever came up. But like, like I said, there's so many problems. There's so many potential problems that it's hard to consider, like hard to create, and probably not even worth it to create every solution possible. So it's just about creating a system around the world, or maybe the countries that are concerned about it, that protect it. But that's something that's happening as we speak, and that's not something that is a default. Like we could just ignore this, and this might not actually come out to a fruition. Like we could just learn no lesson from the pandemic and move on, and then in maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's another 100 years, get hit by something again. Like that's what happened before. Like, that's history. It could just happen that same way, or maybe we figure something better out this next time. And I hope we do. I mean, I don't really have any great ideas personally, because it's not my expertise, but I think we can do it.
What is something you're interested in, or what kind of questions do you have about stuff?
Oh man. Like in general, like life stuff.
What would you love to do with the job? What are some things you're excited for in science and things like that? Yeah.
So big one. Well, one big one with all my space medicine stuff. Like I want, back to what I was saying before about fundamentally now as a human animal, we have new responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities comes from our unique knowledge and self-awareness of the possibility of extinction. As we know it, we're probably the only species on the planet that is extinction aware. No other species probably comprehends that it can go extinct, or how it can even go extinct. And yet we have good records and a very good understanding that many species on Earth have gone extinct throughout all of its history. And so I think that kind of consciousness should lead us to the conclusion that we should probably do everything in our power to decrease that chance, because life is pretty cool and we probably all want to keep living it.
Right.
So, and I don't mean just humans. Like my thing when I think about colonizing Mars is I want to bring all life forms, including dogs, to other planets. Like I think, like, if we're not doing anything else, then what are we doing anything for? If we're not doing that, what are we doing anything else for? Because nothing else matters unless we make it matter by spreading life to other planets. So join me in my galactic empire and my new empire.
I remember getting super high with my roommate in college, and we were talking about, like, what do you think the meaning of life? Just the classic conversation. And his thing too was like, he thinks the purpose of humans is to like populate other planets and things like that. And I was like, I don't know if that's the case, but he should join you.
That's what I think a lot about. And part of that, I think, we're going to learn a lot over these next couple of decades. One of my big beliefs, one of my big preaching points on my social media stuff has always been, like, the 2030s are going to be really, really, really weird. Like, the 2020s have been weird. They've been pretty weird compared to just 2000 up until now.
Kicked off with a bang. Yeah.
And it is only going to get weird. Like, we're a pretty nostalgic animal, right? We like to think about life as it was a lot. And it's really going to become uncomfortable when nothing looks the same. Like, life is going to be pretty different in 2030s. And that's a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have more control over biology, as well as, computers. I mean, this AI stuff is changing everything, and it's going to continue to do that, just like with the internet. So yeah, that's something I think a lot about. And but with that change, a lot of it's going to be extremely positive, and that's really great. And I think like with climate change and the threat, the mass extinction threat that's happening to a lot of the living species on the planet, I think we can learn a lot from that situation. I don't know if it's a minority still. It was certainly a minority when I thought about it back in college, but like applying biotechnology to conservation, to species conservation. I think we're getting to points where like typical conservation efforts don't work out because you're just at odds with factors that are like ambient factors like temperature and acidity and stuff like that. And so we need to apply like these godlike powers to conserve animals, or because it makes you ask a question like if you sort of Perseus's boat, like if you take apart Perseus's boat and then put it back together with all new pieces one by one, is it still the original boat?
Oh,
And it's
I never heard that.
Oh yeah, so it's this thought experiment of like if you take something apart, little like one piece at a time to like refurbish it, replace it with a newer piece. It still looks the same, but it's just new. Eventually, you get rid of all the old, and all you have is new. Is it still the original boat? Technically, no. That's what we're trying to do with this de-extinction movement from companies like Colossal, where they're trying to bring back the mammoth, or the thylacine, or the dodo. Now, we can have all sorts of conversations about the difficulties of this, or like what's the point of bringing back some of these animals. I'm actually a little bit more in the camp of, and it was cool in UGA. I took a de-extinction class, which is really cool to think about back
Sick.
then. But I think we should call a spade and say, we're not de-extincting anything. We're not bringing back the original mammoth. What we're going to do is genetically modify an Asian elephant so far until it looks like and talks like and acts like what we think a mammoth would.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we pull bits and pieces from a mammoth genome to make that happen? Yeah, it does. But that doesn't make the mammoth. The mammoth will never come back, not as it truly was. But is that an issue? No, I don't think so. You can call it a mammoth. I don't care. But what we've done is we've genetically modified an existing animal to exist in an environment that it otherwise wouldn't, to save it. And I think we're going to have to do that a lot. I think we're actually going to have to do that a lot more if we continue down the path we're going down. I think we're actually doing a decent job with like new energy alternatives, but we're really not doing a good job when it comes to biodiversity and like stopping that from going, from going away. And I think we're going to need to make decisions that a lot of people right now are probably not comfortable with, like creating a genetically modified population of tigers or cheetah. Every cheetah is like 99% related right now. Like they're going to collapse. Yeah, they're not healthy. There's the inbreeding in cheetah populations is incredible. We're going to have to do something about that, or we just lose cheetahs because you can't. There's no more the traditional conservation method of just like, hey, let's keep some of them in a zoo and we'll just like make sure that the selective breeding is different enough that like their offspring are still healthy. Like we don't get that math anymore. We've squeezed that juice out. So we're going to need to make decisive changes to their genome to ensure that cheetahs or cheetah-like animals, whatever you want to call them, exist. I like them to exist. And I think they're pretty cool animals. But that might also mean that we have to create new animals for niches that have gone unsatisfied, like the mammoth is a good example. Like that's what they're trying to do, is trying to bring back megafauna to these steppe plains that used to be full of megafauna, which are large animals, but now they don't exist. And so this area has become like kind of dead. It's just dead land. And big animals can help with that, not just mammoths, but also like woolly rhinos and other things. And we could do that for many other many other environments that are starting to lose important animals. I think the good example was when we took away wolves from Yellowstone and all the rivers diverted.
Right. Yeah.
Because of all the deer. And like, that's just a really good example of like, if we can just identify these niches, we might not have the animal to bring back to it, but can we create a new animal, not from scratch, just like kind of carry an existing animal's evolution into that niche and have it fulfill the role it used to be fulfilled by. So I think we're going to do a lot of that. And I think from that, we're going to learn a lot about terraforming, as well as what we're going to learn about like changing the climate. And I think we're going to apply that to Mars and other planets. And I think in the 2100s, we have a very exciting future ahead of us if AGI doesn't kill us all.
Sure. I guess from what you were saying, a cool example of that, to my understanding, from a paper that came out a few years ago, all of the dogs that were brought or that were indigenous to the Americas have no more indigenous DNA. They're all replaced by European dogs. So even like Chihuahuas and Cholos, which we think, I mean, just are inherently Aztec dogs or Mexican dogs, have at some point been like their great litter behind that was, bred with the Spanish Mastiff. And then like they were like, oh, but we want it more Chihuahua, so they like brought it back to that kind of thing. Not a Mastiff's probably not the right.
Oh, okay. I was like actually trying to picture that in my head. I was like, no. What the hell? Like this is news to me, dude.
That would be crazy, especially if the Chihuahua had to birth the Mastiff. But so in that case, like the Amerindian dog is gone. There's like the Carolina Dingo, and I'm assuming Cholos have like more indigenous DNA than other dogs because they are indigenous dogs, but that's where it's at for me. So like same, at least the dogs never died out, but with the mammoth, it's like they're just completely gone. And like now we got to bring them back, and it's an elephant or a mammoth with an asterisk next to it,
Yeah. And what's, the biggest challenge I see with that too is that like, I actually think that from the genetic standpoint, that's not like, we're going to get that done. The roadmap is plausible. There's not like this impossible physics problem that stands in our way. But what is pretty improbable to me is that like, okay, congratulations. We have the first mammoth. It came out of an Asian elephant, but we have the first mammoth. It looks like a mammoth. It feels like a mammoth. It's got mammoth DNA. But how do you teach a mammoth to mammoth? They're mammals.
Right.
All mammals are very social creatures. And a lot of its function, just like its daily function, comes from lessons taught from a parent, right? So I don't know how to square that circle at all. And that's an issue. I mean, Asian elephants don't know how to exist in the tundra. So I don't know what advice they're going to get from them. That one is interesting to me.
And then I worry about like the genetic, like deformities or abnormalities that will come from it. Cause like let's say if one is born and it's a good hybrid, but it's like missing its trunk or something, like an elephant can't exist like that. Or if it's got, not to say Down syndrome is like a defect, but like, the ethics of like, the first mammoth born has Down syndrome and it's going to be like, should we do this kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is not going to go well the first time.
It's going to come out and it's like, kill me.
Have you seen Full Metal Alchemist?
I've heard of it. It's like a show, right?
Yeah. Anime. Okay, I can't quite make the joke. It won't land. But anyone in the audience knows what I'm talking about when it comes to like chimeras. But anyways, I think it's going to be, that is kind of the price we pay with science when you're doing experiments. I mean, especially when it comes to like larger animal experiments, they don't always go right and weird things can happen. And you do have to ask those ethical questions about like, do we continue doing this? Do the ends justify the means? I don't know. I don't know how to square that either, as not someone who's working on that project, but
if it's for the mammoths to repopulate the steppe and work with climate change, I think, and that's again one of those things I don't know exactly the science of, but I know that's like a thing with it, like to bring back giant ruminants like that. Um, but if it's just for purely our entertainment, like a dodo in a zoo or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, it's like that's where it's like, yeah, should we?
Right.
Um,
I'm with you on that
um,
too. I'm not like that would be kind of, this weird dark timeline that we take where we just create, weird animals for zoos, that would be kind of disgusting. And I hope that's not the case. And I don't think it is with the companies already that are working on it, but in the future, if it becomes easier, that would
yeah,
be a terrible path to take. I think the idea for me, the means would justify the ends if the ends are the world as a whole, the biodiversity on the planet as a whole improves such that all living things benefit from that biodiversity, right? So the problem that we're facing today is that as we lose more species, the opportunities for any new species to exist to come about also decreases, and the likelihood of extinction increases. You get what we call extinction vortex, or vortices for the plural of vortex, but where you just lose more diversity in the genome, and they keep interbreeding until like none of the offspring are viable, and then
yeah,
the species goes extinct. And that happens more and more and more. Like polar bears are a good example, cheetahs, like I mentioned, the rhino. And then it sucks even more when that particular animal is also being hunted by humans.
yeah,
It's not good enough that the entire world is against that species. And look, don't get me wrong, evolution is not this beautiful, pretty system, right? Like plenty of species have gone extinct. Like that's the default. Like I said, in a world where we now have new responsibilities and new powers to protect it, whether or not it's our fault, I agree with you, whether or not that's even the conclusion or the driving factor. All we do know is that it's happening and that we might be able to do something about it. And, I'd want to do something about
yeah. It's a bleak subject.
it. Yeah.
You mentioned humans are like a nostalgic species. Like, do
Mhm.
you think that, because this is my leading theory on it, that it's like nostalgia helps hunter gatherers or back in the day remember like, oh, this area is where we picked and there were great resources here,
Yeah.
or like this is that hunting ground, that's the cave where we stashed the thing. That's got to be what it is, other than because like it is a powerful feeling for sure. I don't know what else it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting, understanding for it, or like motivation, I think, for it. I could see it being something like also relationship building. I mean, I don't know about you. I guess we might be sharing about what we get nostalgic about. But when you
Yeah,
think about your friends and families and the times you spent together too, like I don't know, there's something like you don't get nostalgic for people you don't care about, right?
right.
You get pretty nostalgic about people you care about, and then when you see them again, like you're just sort of fulfilling or like reinforcing that care. So I think there's a social survival benefit there as well. Now I agree that it's probably a big like resource survival factor as well. Remembering, yes, remember that green pasture. Gosh, it's so much better than this frozen tundra that I'm currently
Mhm.
walking through. So yeah, I think in general, I mean, memory is a weird thing, man. Trying to think about even in medicine when we study neurology. I remember studying neurology, and here we are, medical students, trying to memorize and learn like so much information, just like a fire hose of information, and and then you're learning how does memory work, and it's just like a really meta moment for every medical student. You're like,
Yeah,
it's so difficult because you have to understand like the exact pathway in your brain that forms memories and all this stuff, and it's just kind of funny to think about like why your brain won't remember the memory pathway. It's like, come on, you're doing it right now, why don't you just know it? But
huh. Yeah, I never really asked anybody that question. I like that response.
nice.
my memory card's about to fill up, so I need to wrap.
Okay.
But I got 3 questions for you. What is your advice to somebody who wants to join the military or is thinking about it?
Okay. Well, I would say have a strong reason why, just like any job, really, and also kind of understand what you bring to the table too. I don't know. I mean, it would be a different conversation if you were considering going the officer path versus enlisted path. I mean, I can't speak much to the enlisted side of things, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a fulfilling career as well. I mean, it's also a hard career, but to be fair, all careers are pretty hard.
Yeah.
I think it's in general, like just make pretty general statements. The military is really great in a time like now where I don't know, there's just like you can do almost anything and everything in life now. And because there's so much opportunity, most people do nothing. And they're paralyzed by decisions and plausible outcomes and like, what if I did this, but then I wanted this and all this. And the military is a funnel. Like you will be squeezed through, if you're a square, you'll be squeezed through a round hole, and it'll make you you will be made to do things. And that kind of structure is actually really, really important for people. And it does improve people's lives. And I think there's something to be said about that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think also the military has been pretty great just from a standpoint of confidence in yourself. I think that's been something that I've gotten out of it too. It's a very special community. You're a 1% of the country, which is really fascinating. Everyone I've met in the military has been incredible. The stereotypes of like what you see in the movies just aren't true. Like we said before, like not everyone's a gunner,
Right.
like most
Yeah.
people aren't. And so that's the other thing is that like you can do anything in the military that you can do on the outside, really. But I will say, like, if you're motivated just by like trying to make as much money as possible, you live in a country that's extremely entrepreneurial, and you can go and do that.
Mhm.
That's different. So it really does depend on your like motivations in life. If you want to travel, it is a good it is a good job for that. I mean, that's the big reason why I chose it too. I plan on
Especially the
going.
Navy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I plan on going into a job role that comes with a lot of travel. But
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of what I would say about that.
Sure. On the brink of giant major conflicts too. But
Yeah, well, we
um,
always are, right? There's always some big boogeyman.
I can second what Sean's saying. Just seeing it secondhand from vets and like people that like I've known that are in the military, it definitely makes you a better, more structured like person, if not like worker. I mean, just a worker, but if not person. Yeah, it's cool, and the attitude and like the gratitude they have, and just like how nice they are as people. Like I it's been cool
I will
working
say
with them.
too, the other thing is that like I think a lot of people hate their jobs in the civilian world
Mm-hmm.
because they don't feel like they're doing any good. They're not part of a bigger mission, and I do believe that humans have to exist with a shared myth or a shared like
Story.
yeah shared
Yeah.
story exactly. And we have so many like, similar to like so many possibilities with your life now. There are so many stories that you can attach to, and like so you end up attaching to none of them or a lot of them, but very weakly. And something
Mm-hmm.
about the military, which is very mission focused, does a great job of attaching you to the story that is, America, right? Is the United
Yeah.
States, which is really cool. I mean, it's a very it, walking around, especially being in DC, man, is like very weird and cool. Like it's like I'm so a part of this. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's pretty cool. I have to say, like it's one of the coolest things now being in the military and just walking around in the United States. It's like this. I mean, I patriotism is pretty cool feeling. Like it's like this is ours. Like I'm part of this. Every taxpayer is part of it, right? That's how they
Mm-hmm.
should feel, but they don't feel that way. And the military gives you
Yeah.
a story that you get to attach to, and your life feels like you're committing to like a bigger goal, and there's fulfillment in that. And so, if you're looking for fulfillment, actually, sorry, one last little bit about it because this
Yeah.
is something I tell. If you're like if you're college educated, you got no idea what you want to do with your life, but you just like to help people, go be a chaplain. Go be a chaplain in the military. They're the best people on the planet. Like, you just pick a religion like that you want to be sponsored by. You can be a pagan chaplain. You could be a Norse pagan chaplain. You could talk
That's
about
cool.
Thor. It doesn't matter. Your only job in the military as a chaplain is to help other people practice their religion, do the last rites and or find people to do the last rites, and also just motivate people. You get to be the mental health advisor for everyone, and it's awesome. Everybody loves chaplains. So if you just want a really cool life, you get paid well, you get respected, you're a high ranking officer, you get to go on cool adventures, you're non-combative, everyone's going to love you. Go be a chaplain. Just do that. I think that's the coolest job in the military, honestly.
Yeah, except for the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. That's a little stressful part of that job.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
Happened that way. I don't think a chaplain would have been on those U-boats.
Probably not. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, yeah, those are amazing answers. I appreciate that. I never would have thought about the chaplain thing too. But I kind of already asked this, but like, what is I always ask, like, what does it mean to be human? But like, in terms of your research, working with witches, learning herbal stuff and our relation to plants, going to the military, working on space stuff. What do you think about humans? What do they mean to you?
Oh gosh. I mean, I if you had asked me when I was a teenager, I would have told you I hate humans. They're all terrible. But no, I love humans. I mean, I think we're incredible. I think, studying human and human evolutions, humans and human evolution, from a genetic standpoint was fascinating. I love this story of humankind. It's such a cool adventure that we've been on so far. I love history for that reason. History and biology are in no way separate, right? In a lot of ways, a lot of history happens because of biological facts. And it's super fun for me to think about that. We're not perfect. And I don't even know that we could call ourselves like good. But that's a conversation about good and evil and what exists and if it exists at all. But I think we need to give ourselves grace. We are still just animals. We're still just trying to figure every day out just as much as everyone else. Or as any other animal. We've been blessed and cursed with consciousness for some reason, right? Whether it's a religious one or just because, the dice were rolled this kind of way. I think we've done well as so far. I mean, every day that we live is another day that's gone by. It's none of this has happened before, right? And so we just keep trying to look out for each other. I think we should look out for the rest of the living things here because they make life worth living. And I think we should keep chasing, taking it back to the beginning, keep chasing those sort of truths about life and like keep finding those, finding out new things. Very much the whole Star Trek idea of like, just go out into the universe and like find cool stuff.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, dude. I like that. I always end this with like, I like that, but yeah, I don't know how else to express it.
Better than you don't like it. It's like, damn, dude,
that's true. Just debate after 2 hours and 22 minutes in. Yeah, dude. Well, where can people find you? We didn't get to talk about your social media stuff, but we can do that next time you're on. Where can people find you? And does your branch of like service have a one too?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow the Navy.
The Navy in general.
I suppose. So you can find me at Dr. or dr.evolu.sean. So Dr. Evolution on Instagram. You can find me on X. You can find me on YouTube, which is really where I plan on trying to grow next. I would actually like to start a podcast of my own where I tell stories that also teach optimistic science lessons. So
sick. I'll put a link in the description here.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll probably be building that up with my current duties as a naval officer and doctor. I am going to be pretty busy. I
Yep.
am going to be active. I'll be active on my Instagram stories. I'll probably be not making a lot of posts for the next year, but I will be writing these podcast stories. So stay tuned for that if you want to check those out. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. I really love stories and I really love science. I figure I could probably put those two together in a pretty cool way, kind of like an anti-Black Mirror, if you will.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Black Mirror gets kind of depressing sometimes, but as interesting as it is.
But it is fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, dude, you're a very eloquent speaker, and I assume that comes with being in the military too, but just like your knowledge and like the way you've done like similes and analogies and stuff, like you're kicking ass at it. So
thanks,
I'd be happy to see where it goes. Yeah.
I'm excited to do it. I think, I've got some cool stories. I'll probably, honestly, there's some I'd probably like to write about dogs and dog cloning. I think there's some cool stories
we didn't get into
there.
That. Then I'll have to get you back on and we can talk about that too. But or we can do it on yours, whichever one. But yeah, dude. Well, appreciate you guys listening, and thanks for coming on. This is cool. I never got to meet you face to face.
Yeah. One of these days we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll party in Savannah. All right. We'll end it on that.
And all of a sudden, the entire crew,
it's just all herped up.